The air in the ballroom hangs thick with the scent of lilies and nervous anticipation. My sister stands at the altar, a vision in white lace, her eyes shining. I watch from the second row, my heart swelling, a familiar ache mingling with the joy. Then I turn my head, just slightly, scanning the faces in the crowd, and the ache becomes a gaping wound, raw and sudden. He is there, my husband, and next to him, her. The woman I've seen him text late at night. The woman whose name I accidentally saw on a crumpled receipt in his coat pocket weeks ago. She's wearing a dress that screams, "Look at me," a vibrant, inappropriate scarlet against the pastel tones of the wedding party. She smiles up at him, touches his arm, and he leans in, whispers something that makes her giggle. It's not the whispering that breaks me. It's the casual intimacy, the shared secret world they inhabit, so brazenly displayed in the sanctuary of my sister's wedding. My own husband, my own life, bleeding out before me in vibrant, horrifying color. The world tilts. The carefully constructed walls I've built around the suspicion, the dread, the quiet knowing, shatter in an instant. The music fades into a distant buzz. The faces around me blur. All I see is them. All I feel is the cold, sharp point of betrayal piercing me clean through. My hands clench, so tight my nails dig into my palms. I can't breathe. I can't move. I am a statue carved of ice and agony, frozen in this moment of exquisite pain. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. Life before felt stable. Maybe a little predictable, a little routine, but solid. I had built a life I was proud of, a career I loved, one that paid well, one that allowed me comforts and security. A nice house, comfortable savings, the ability to say yes when people I loved needed help. And I had Mark, my husband. 10 years. A decade of shared dinners, quiet nights on the sofa, weekend trips that blurred into a comfortable rhythm. We were that couple. The one who finished each other's sentences, the one everyone assumed was built on a bedrock of something unbreakable. Or maybe that was just the story I told myself. The story I desperately needed to be true. My sister, Clara, was my anchor. Younger by 5 years, she was the free spirit, the artist, the one who chased dreams while I built empires in boardrooms. I'd always looked out for her, ever since we were kids sharing a bunk bed and whispered secrets in the dark. When she met Ethan, I saw a light ignite in her that I hadn't seen before. He was good for her. Stable, kind, truly saw her messy, beautiful soul. Planning their wedding was a joy, a distraction, maybe, from the growing unease I felt about Mark. The late nights at work that stretched later and later. The phone always face down. The way his touch felt. Different. Distant. But I pushed it down. Focused on colors, flowers, venues. I wanted Clara to have the wedding of her dreams. The kind of wedding I'd always imagined for myself. Maybe, if my own reality hadn't felt like it was slowly, subtly fracturing. I didn't just help. I paid. For most of it. Clara and Ethan were just starting out. Student loans building careers. They had a modest budget, but I saw the dreams in Clara's eyes that her budget couldn't quite reach. I had the means. It felt right. An investment in her happiness, in their future. A gift given out of pure love, with no strings attached. I told them I'd cover the big stuff, the venue, the catering, the photographer. Just the big things, I'd said, waving away their protests. They were overwhelmed, grateful. They insisted on contributing everything they had saved for smaller details, flowers, decorations. We agreed to keep my larger contribution quiet. A private gift. They'd thank me privately, we'd agreed. It felt good, seeing Clara so happy, so relieved. It felt like I was doing something concrete, building something beautiful, while my own life felt increasingly abstract and uncertain. Mark knew I was contributing. He knew I was helping. He didn't know the extent. I'd kept that from him, not out of secrecy, but because, I don't know, maybe it felt too personal, too much about my relationship with Clara, something separate from him. Or maybe, deep down, I already knew he didn't fully appreciate the things I built, the resources I commanded. He liked the lifestyle my success provided, but he rarely asked about the work, the effort. He had his own money, of course, but mine was more. Significantly more. He seemed content with that arrangement. I handled the big expenses, the investments, the financial planning. He handled well, he handled his life. His work, his hobbies. His secrets, apparently. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a blur of last-minute details, dress fittings, hen parties. Mark was present. Physically. He came to the rehearsal dinner, played the doting husband. There were moments I almost convinced myself I was imagining things. The distance, the subtle shifts. Maybe it was stress. Wedding stress. Life stress. But the knot in my stomach tightened every time his phone buzzed and he glanced at it with that guarded expression. And then the wedding day arrived. The morning was chaos and joy. Getting ready with Clara, her bridesmaids, my mother. The scent of hairspray and perfume, the flutter of excitement. Mark was getting ready at the hotel. He was supposed to meet me at the venue just before the ceremony started. He arrived later than planned, just as guests were being seated. He didn't come find me first. He walked in, scanned the crowd, and went directly to her. She was already there. How long had she been here? Had she been at the rehearsal dinner? Had she been mingling with my family, my friends all weekend, right under my nose? The thought sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. She was clinging to his arm, her head tilted back, laughing at something. That dress. That awful, attention-seeking red dress. It hit me then, with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't a secret rendezvous. This wasn't a furtive affair he was trying to hide. He brought her here. To my sister's wedding. To our family event. He brought his mistress to parade her in front of me, in front of everyone. The disrespect. The sheer, audacious cruelty of it. It was a violation not just of our marriage vows, but of a sacred space, a family milestone. It was an act of war, declared not with shouting and tears, but with a casual stroll down an aisle meant for love and commitment. I managed to sit down somehow. My legs felt like lead. My hands were shaking now, openly. I clasped them in my lap, trying to hide the tremor. My mother, next to me, leaned over. "Are you okay, darling? You're a bit pale." I forced a smile. Just the excitement. Seeing Clara, she patted my hand, unsuspecting. The weight of the secret, the shock, pressed down on me, crushing the air from my lungs. I couldn't look at them. Not really. Only out of the corner of my eye. They were sitting a few rows back on his side, of course, but still visible. A constant, burning focal point in my periphery. Every whispered word between them, every shared glance, felt like a spotlight trained on my humiliation. The ceremony was beautiful, ethereal. Clara and Ethan exchanged vows, their voices clear and full of hope. It was everything a wedding should be. And it was agony. Agony to witness such genuine love while my own was being desecrated just yards away. Agony to know that the man I married, who stood before God and family and promised forever, was mocking the very idea of fidelity at this holy occasion. The recessional was a blur. Everyone was smiling, crying happy tears, hugging. I felt like I was moving underwater. My smile was a painted mask, brittle and fragile. I avoided Mark. He made no move to approach me. He stayed with her, introduced her to people. My family friends. I heard him laugh, that familiar sound that now felt like nails on a chalkboard. He was acting like this was perfectly normal. Like he hadn't just committed an act of breathtaking cruelty. The cocktail hour was worse. Mingling was unavoidable. People congratulated me on Clara's happiness. Isn't she radiant? What a beautiful wedding. Each compliment felt like a jab. Yes, it was beautiful. A beautiful backdrop for my public execution. I saw them across the lawn near the fountain. She was laughing, tossing her head back. He had his hand on her lower back. A possessive gesture. In front of everyone. In front of me. A relative came up to me, someone who hadn't seen Mark in a while. Oh, is Mark here? She asked, scanning the crowd. I'd love to say hello, my heart seized. I plastered on that brittle smile again. Yes, he's around. I vaguely gestured in the direction of the fountain, hoping she wouldn't connect the dots. Mercifully, someone else snagged her attention. I retreated to the edge of the terrace, needing air. The evening air was cool, a stark contrast to the fire raging inside me. My mind was a whirlwind of anger, hurt, confusion. What was the point of this? What was he trying to achieve? Humiliate me? Force my hand? Was he expecting me to cause a scene, to erupt in a fit of jealous rage? Was that his exit strategy? To make me look like the crazy wife, so he could walk away cleanly. A cold calm began to settle over me. If that was his game, I wouldn't play it. This was Clara's day. I would not ruin it for her. Not for anything. I would smile. I would congratulate. I would play the part of the supportive sister, the gracious host. I would not give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. But the calm wasn't resignation. It was something harder, colder. As I watched him across the lawn, laughing with her, a thought formed. A quiet, dangerous thought. He thought he had the power here. He thought he was calling the shots, dictating the narrative. He thought he could publicly shame me, parade his disrespect, and I would just take it. He forgot who he was dealing with. He forgot who held the reins, not just emotionally, but practically, financially. He forgot that the very ground he was standing on, the lavish party he was enjoying, was built on my foundation. The reception hall was breathtaking. Twinkling lights, elegant centerpieces, a live band playing soft jazz. I was seated at the head table, with Clara and Ethan, their parents, and Mark. Mark sat next to me, as if nothing was wrong. She was at a table just 2 tables away, with some of Mark's distant cousins he'd apparently rounded up as cover. I could see her from my seat. She kept glancing over, a smirk playing on her lips. A smirk of triumph. Sitting next to Mark felt like sitting next to a stranger. A repulsive stranger who had invaded my life. He tried to make small talk. Asked if I'd enjoyed the ceremony. I answered in monosyllables. My voice felt rusty and used. I focused on Clara, on Ethan. Their happiness was the only real thing in the room. The dinner was long, a drawn-out exercise in torture. Every time I had to interact with Mark, every time I saw her, felt like another twist of the knife. He was charming to the people around him, playing the role of the proud husband and brother-in-law. It was a performance so convincing, so sickening, it made my skin crawl. How long had he been living this double life? How many times had he lied to my face, touched me, told me he loved me, while planning this elaborate betrayal? The smirk on her face grew bolder throughout the evening. She caught my eye once, and her smile widened, a silent taunt. She thought she had won. She thought she had taken my husband, invaded my family event, and emerged victorious. She saw me, the wife, relegated to the head table while she, the mistress, was the exciting new presence, disrupting the old order. She underestimated me just as much as Mark did. I ate mechanically, tasted nothing. My entire being was focused, narrowed to a single point of intense observation. I watched them. I watched Mark. I watched the calculated way he interacted with her, the casual touches when he thought no one was looking. I watched his arrogance, his assumption of control. He was so certain he was getting away with it that I was either too blind or too weak to do anything about it. People gave speeches. Clara's father, her bridesmaids, Ethan's best man. Stories of Clara and Ethan, of their love story, their future. Words like commitment, fidelity, partnership filled the air. Each word landed like a blow, a bitter irony in this room. Mark just sat there listening, occasionally nodding, a picture of respectability. The hypocrisy was suffocating. My gaze kept drifting back to her table. She was talking animatedly to the people she was seated with, basking in the attention. She had probably concocted some story about who she was, how she knew Mark. A colleague? A friend? Lies layered upon lies, built on the foundation of my life. Then it was time for the groom's speech. Ethan stood up, walked to the microphone at the front of the room. He looked a little nervous, but happy. He began talking about Clara, about their journey together. He thanked his family, Clara's family. He thanked the wedding party. His voice was warm, sincere. I glanced at Mark. He was smiling a relaxed, confident smile. He probably thought the worst was over. He'd brought her. He'd endured the initial awkwardness, if he even felt any, and now he could just coast through the rest of the night, playing the part. He had no idea. Ethan continued his speech. He talked about how grateful he and Clara were for everyone who had helped make their day possible. The vendors, the friends who had pitched in. He looked directly at the head table. He thanked Clara's parents for their love and support. He thanked me, his new sister-in-law, for being there for Clara. He paused, took a breath. My heart rate, which had been a slow, heavy drumbeat of dread all night, picked up speed. I looked at Ethan, wondering what he would say next. We had agreed, privately. Just a quiet thank you later. Was he going to mention anything? A small thank you? My blood ran cold for a second, thinking he might inadvertently reveal something in front of Mark. But then I remembered our conversation. He was a good man. He wouldn't betray my confidence. Ethan's gaze swept across the room, then landed back on me, holding mine for just a fraction of a second longer than before. A flicker of something in his eyes. Not recognition, but confirmation? Anticipation. He smiled. A big, genuine, slightly nervous Groom smile. He cleared his throat. And finally, he said, his voice projected clearly through the speakers, reaching every corner of the ballroom. The room quieted, people leaning in for the closing remarks. Clara and I want to express our deepest, most profound gratitude to someone without whom none of this, exactly as it is, would have been possible. He paused again. He wasn't looking at the head table anymore. His gaze seemed to sweep across the room, past Mark, past her, towards the general seating area. Was he talking about a wedding planner? A specific vendor? Confusion rippled through the room. We know that traditionally, there are many people who contribute to a wedding, Ethan continued, his voice full of emotion. Parents, family, friends. And we are so thankful for every bit of love and support we've received. He turned back to the head table. He looked directly at me now. There was something in his eyes. Something that wasn't just gratitude, but a quiet strength, a deliberate purpose. But in our case, Ethan said, his voice gaining a touch of emphasis, there is one person who went above and beyond. Someone who, out of the incredible generosity of her heart and her overwhelming love for Clara, chose to make this entire dream a reality. The murmurs started then. People exchanged confused glances.
Who was he talking about?
Not his parents, he'd already thanked them. Not Clara's parents, they were right there, looking just as surprised as everyone else. Ethan's smile softened. He looked only at me now. His voice was gentle, but firm, carrying the weight of undeniable truth. My amazing sister-in-law, he announced, his voice ringing out. Sarah. My name hung in the air for a beat. People looked from him, to me, then back to him. Still confused. Just Sarah? What did that mean? Ethan didn't hesitate. He spoke the words that sealed Mark's fate, the words that turned the key on the carefully constructed trap Mark had unknowingly walked into. Sarah, Ethan repeated, his gaze unwavering from mine. Words cannot express how much we owe you. You didn't just help with a few things. You didn't just contribute. You funded our entire wedding. Every beautiful detail, every delicious meal, every perfect moment. You gave us this. Out of pure love. The silence that followed was deafening. The air thickened, became heavy, electric. It wasn't just my name, or the confirmation of my role. It was the stark, public declaration. I paid for this. I made this happen. While my husband was planning to bring his mistress here, I was writing the checks that paid for the chairs they sat on, the food they ate, the music they listened to. All eyes in the room shifted. From Ethan, to me at the head table, then inevitably, inexorably, to Mark. Mark. His face. I will never forget his face.
He froze.
The confident smile vanished, replaced by an expression of utter shock, disbelief, and dawning horror. His eyes widened, darting from Ethan to me, to the crowd, his mind clearly scrambling to process what was happening. He hadn't expected this. Not this. He thought his betrayal was the main event. He thought he was the one in control, orchestrating the drama. He had been so focused on me as the victim of his infidelity, he had completely forgotten, or perhaps never truly grasped, my strength, my capability, my independence. He had lived off my success for years, enjoying the fruits of my labor, but he had never respected the source. He had never seen me as the architect of my own fortune, the one who held the real power. He saw me as the wife he was leaving, the predictable, stable home he was abandoning for something he perceived as more exciting, more vibrant. He hadn't seen me as the woman who quietly built an empire while he went about his comfortable life. He certainly hadn't seen me as the benefactor of the very event he was using as a stage. The plot twist wasn't just the reveal of the funding. The plot twist, in that agonizing second of silence, was the sudden, violent collision of his perception of me with the undeniable reality just announced. He saw his mistress sitting 2 tables away, suddenly exposed not as the glamorous other woman, joining him at a lavish event he was part of, but as a parasite at a feast funded by the woman he was publicly humiliating. He saw himself, not as the dashing man choosing a new path, but as a hypocritical cheat who couldn't even pay for the chairs under the mistresses behind. His entire carefully constructed narrative, his sense of control, his arrogance, collapsed in on itself. He looked at me again, his eyes filled with something I had never seen before. Not anger, not just shock. Terror.
Pure un adulterante terror.
The terror of a man whose world has just been demonstrably and irrevocably destroyed, not by his enemy, but by the very person he thought he had conquered. The room started to buzz again, louder this time. Whispers.
Gasps.
Everyone was looking at Mark now. They saw his reaction. They saw the mistress shrinking in her seat. The story wasn't about Clara and Ethan anymore.
It was about this.
Mark tried to stand up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. He swayed. He clutched at the edge of the table. His face was ashen, slick with sweat. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked like a cornered animal caught in a spotlight, with no place to run. The smirk on the mistress's face was gone, replaced by a mask of shock and fear. She was trying to melt into her chair. Then, slowly, agonizingly, Mark crumpled. His eyes rolled back. He made a choked sound, a horrible, guttural gasp.
And he collapsed.
Not dramatically, like in a movie. Just fell. His body hit the floor with a sickening thud. Glasses clattered. A collective scream erupted from the crowd. Chaos. The music stopped. People rushed forward. Clara screamed. My mother gasped, covering her mouth. The mistress yelped, scrambling away from Mark's fallen body as if it were contaminated. I didn't move. I couldn't. I was still seated at the head table, watching the scene unfold like it was happening in slow motion. Mark on the floor. His mistress recoiling. The shocked faces of the guests. The sound of Clara crying out his name. A paramedic, thankfully a guest at the wedding, was immediately at Mark's side, checking for a pulse. Someone else called for an ambulance. The festive ballroom had become a scene of emergency, panic replacing celebration. They loosened his tie, lifted his legs. His face was unnaturally pale. He looked small, vulnerable, utterly defeated. The arrogant man who had walked in hours earlier, flaunting his betrayal, was gone, replaced by this pathetic, collapsed figure. The mistress was being ushered away by one of Mark's cousins, her red dress now looking garish and out of place amidst the confusion. She was crying, dabbing at her eyes, but her tears seemed to be more about the ruined evening, the exposure, than any concern for Mark. Clara rushed to my side, her eyes wide and frightened. Sarah? What happened? She whispered, grabbing my hand. Is he okay? I looked at my sister, her wedding day shattered by this man's actions. My own heart was a tangled mess of shock, relief, cold satisfaction, and an unexpected, faint flicker of nothing. Just emptiness where a marriage used to be. I squeezed Clara's hand. "I don't know, sweetie," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. But it happened. The paramedics arrived quickly. They worked over Mark, checking vitals, asking questions. It seemed it was a panic attack. A severe one, triggered by extreme stress and shock. Not a heart attack, though at first, everyone feared the worst. The doctor later told me his blood pressure had spiked dangerously high. His body simply couldn't handle the sudden, public dismantling of his reality. They lifted him onto a stretcher, carrying him out of the ballroom, past the stunned faces of the wedding guests. The mistress was nowhere to be seen. She had apparently slipped out during the commotion. A coward until the end. The room was left in a state of stunned silence after they were gone. The celebratory atmosphere had been utterly annihilated. Clara was distraught, not just about Mark, but about her ruined reception. Ethan held her close, murmuring reassurances. I stood up. My legs felt steady now. The ice had melted, leaving behind a strange, clear calm. I looked out at the faces of the guests. They were all looking at me. Their eyes filled with questions, speculation, sympathy, curiosity. They had witnessed the climax of a drama they hadn't even known was playing out. I walked over to Clara and Ethan. "I am so sorry," I said, my voice low. Clara shook her head, tears streaming down her face.
"Sarah, no.
"This isn't your fault. How could he?"
Ethan put an arm around me.
"It's okay, Sarah. It's just a shock." A huge shock. He looked at me, his eyes full of understanding and empathy. He knew what had just happened. He knew that his simple act of gratitude had unintentionally, spectacularly, blown up my life. And in doing so, had delivered a form of justice I couldn't have orchestrated myself. I looked around the room. The beautiful decorations, the half-eaten plates of food, the band instruments sitting idle. This perfect day, marred by his grotesque actions and spectacular downfall. We can stop," I said, my voice a little stronger. "If you want, we can just end it here." Clara looked at Ethan, then back at me. She wiped her eyes. A flicker of defiance, the fiery spirit I knew and loved, returned to her gaze. "No," she said, her voice trembling but firm.
"No.
This is our wedding. This is our day. We're not going to let him and her take this from us." Ethan nodded in agreement, his grip on Clara tightening.
"She's right.
"We won't. We can't. Let's just keep going. As best we can." And so, the wedding reception, after a dramatic pause for cardiac arrest or near enough, tentatively resumed. The band started playing again, slowly at first. Guests, still buzzing with shock and gossip, gradually returned to their tables. It was awkward, strained, the air thick with the unspoken events of the last half hour. I didn't go back to the head table. I found a quiet corner, watched the fragmented party resume. People approached me cautiously. Some offered condolences, others just a gentle squeeze of the hand. No one mentioned Mark, or the mistress, or the funding directly. But it was understood. The air crackled with the knowledge. My sister's wedding, the happiest day of her life, turned upside down. And yet, in the wreckage, there was a strange clarity. My marriage was over. There was no going back from this. No possibility of repair, of forgiveness. His public, audacious betrayal, followed by his equally public, spectacular collapse, had severed the ties completely. It was brutal. It was humiliating. But it was also free. The cold satisfaction I felt earlier returned, mixed with a profound sadness for the decade of my life that had just been exposed as a lie. He had built his deceit on my stability, my success, my love. And in the end, it was that very foundation he tried to disregard that brought his world crashing down. He thought he was bringing down my world, but mine, though shaken, remained standing. It was his, built on sand and lies, that crumbled.
He underestimated me.
He saw me as a wife, maybe a successful wife, but ultimately defined by my relationship to him. He didn't see me as an independent force, capable of quiet strength, capable of building a life, capable of holding all the cards without him even knowing I was playing the game. My contribution to Clara's wedding was just an act of love. But in the context of his betrayal, it became a weapon, silently loaded, fired by the unsuspecting hand of the groom, landing a direct hit on the target Mark thought was untouchable: his pride, his control, his carefully curated image. The rest of the night was a blur. I stayed long enough to see Clara and Ethan cut the cake, share their first dance. They tried to recapture the joy, and in moments, they succeeded. Their love was real. It was the only real thing left in my vicinity. I said my goodbyes, hugged Clara tight, promised we'd talk soon. She squeezed my hand back, a look of love and worry on her face. I left the wedding venue under the stars, leaving the damaged party behind. The cool air felt clean on my skin. The weight I had carried all night, the dread and the pain, had been replaced by a weary emptiness and a strange, hard resolve. The building held its breath. The ground had shaken. But I was still standing. My life, my future, stretched out before me, empty of Mark, empty of the lie, but full of terrifying, exhilarating possibility. The paper trail, the financial foundation I had built, had proven more powerful than the emotional chaos he tried to unleash. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.